just to start things off, Judy, did you, as far as the club itself contributing to the anti-human trafficking program, you want to provide the latest on that?
I think the check's being sent. I think Mary, right? Is that what you're talking about, the grant?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, we are sending a check for $5,000.
Oh,
grateful for
fabulous.
that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And did we find out where to send it?
My office.
Oh, actually, did we find
That
out?
was my question. I didn't know how it would be.
I remember.
Oh, no.
I can get that answer to you. So it might, in all candor, it might be a little premature. And
That's what I was
I'm
wondering,
grateful
yeah.
for that. And here's why it's premature. So we've just submitted, we being the district in this committee, we just submitted the global grant for RI's review. So the process is we created the global grant, the district's grant committee gave it its thumbs up, and then not a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago almost now, we submitted it for RI. We expect, and talking with Venki, who's with the Del Mar Solana Beach Club, Steve's club, who's been instrumental in helping the rest of us sort of muddle through this process. We haven't gotten approval from RI yet, and what we expect that there will be dialogue back and forth, because the global grant that we submitted, we did so under a COVID exemption, which essentially said that the partnering international body, in this case the Tijuana Rotary Club, is waived from having to commit 30% of the grant monies to them. Because this is a reverse global grant and Tijuana already had money allocated, we felt it was unnecessary, wasn't really something that we wanted to make them accountable for. They're gracious enough to contribute $500 as a nominal, hey, we're part of this partnership, but nothing more than that. So anyway, that's a long story to say, we expect some pushback. Once we get the approval, we'll start funding that one. I expect that's in the coming weeks, if not months. Like, it could be a couple months before we get the final okay. So I'll get back to you on that.
I think
Mark, if that's okay.
We actually approved for a $5,000 grant that we are going to focus on anti-human trafficking and really partner. But
okay.
Yeah, the check's not being sent. We wanted to get more information. And that's what prompted this call. Just get more details and specifics on the global grant, also on the matching opportunity.
Got it. Because this is where I thought, and what was my next question? I didn't want to question that beforehand. I don't believe, if I remember the global grant correctly, that we had an allocation for that global grant from Rancho Santa Fe. We have the grant fully funded, but in conversations that I had with Judy, now I want to say about 6 weeks ago or so, Judy,
right,
you were gracious enough. Right. It was the idea about where can we use the funds, and I do have some updates on that, but I don't want to preempt the discussion now on that. Mark was asking, at least as I understand it, Mark was asking if you wanted a general overview as to what the district is doing, and then I can get into specifics about where we think that there would be money that could be allocated. Does that work?
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Yeah, perfect.
I'll try to do this as brief as I can. I'm grateful to Mark's participation in the steering committee and his leadership and the ideas that he's been able to champion for this one on so many different levels. In particular, some of the outreach to other nonprofits on projects we can do in supporting human trafficking survivors and victims right now. And of course, to District Governor Steve for his willingness to take this on and increase the awareness district-wide on what has been, at this point, very, very various amount of clubs within the district have taken this on themselves. But what we saw, and Steve has certainly keenly seen, is the opportunity to coordinate efforts, to create efficient and sufficient efforts, utilizing all 3,000 Rotarians in a coordinated effort. And in doing so, we intend to not leave any definitive gaps, but also be able to galvanize efforts so that one club's initiatives complement other clubs' initiatives. Certainly not taken away from what clubs may want to do on their own because of the relationships they have. But we think, at least if we're all aware of those and put those into a cohesive plan, we're going to make a big difference without leaving any gaps, any stone unturned, any people sort of left on the outs. So I'm grateful for that. My name is Dave Oates, by the way, for some of you that I'm just meeting for the first time. I'm the immediate past president of Club 33. And I made the fatal error of talking to Steve about our anti-human trafficking efforts. And that proceeded to make me the chair of a great steering committee for the District Human Trafficking Committee in fine Rotary fashion. And I'm grateful to do so. Let me explain to you what we're doing real quick, and then I'll get to the specifics on where I think your funds can be best utilized if you so choose. We are taking a coordinated effort on essentially three fronts: awareness, and awareness in general to Rotarians, awareness to the people that we feel are on the front lines of preventing human trafficking, and then the third is volunteers for those who have been victimized or certainly thriving now in a survivor state of their experiences in human trafficking. But we're placing a greater emphasis on the prevention for these reasons. There are 3,000 to 6,000 human trafficking victims in San Diego County as we talk. That is according to a study done now about 4.5 years ago from Point Loma Nazarene University. The average age of those victims are 16, and 80% are US citizens. They are recruited as early as the 5th grade through online and in-person efforts, through individuals that we would say are grooming them, citing vulnerabilities, and then ultimately those victims oftentimes will run to their trafficker and not be what I think the myth is: kidnapped, forced into prostitution at the early stage. They may be forced later on once they have become a victim, but at the early stages, they are groomed, they are coddled, they are coerced through fraud before they are actually forced into the human trafficking lifestyle. What you'll also find is that there really isn't any segment of San Diego County that doesn't have victims within its area. In other words, it's not just a border problem. It certainly isn't just an immigrant problem. 80% are US citizens. So this issue, this scourge, which, oh, by the way, there's approximately an $810 million illicit business just within the borders of San Diego County, is second only narcotics, exists in every part of San Diego County. The reason we're focused on prevention was based on a conversation that has started with the Assistant District Attorney for San Diego County, a woman by the name of Mary Ellen Barrett, which I think some of you may know. Mary Ellen has this under her purview as directed by Summer Steffen, the District Attorney. And she told me in various conversations, as she may have for you all, said, look, if all 3,000 to 6,000 human trafficking victims and their exploiters were to show up on my doorstep and turn themselves in, we could not prosecute them all. We will not enforce our way out of this scourge. So in addition to certainly helping on law enforcement side and the survivor side, the biggest impact that we can make is in preventing those from becoming victims. And so there's 3 things that we're going to do here in the district to help ensure that we do that. One is we're going to do this in lockstep with a San Diego Human Trafficking Prevention Collective. Some of you may know the district attorney is certainly involved with this one in their office, but it is championed by UBS Financial Services, in particular, the market president by the name of Chris Marsh. And Chris Marsh got into this initiative thanks to some generosities of some high net and ultra high net worth investors who put some of their portfolio in the hands of Chris and said, we want to affect real change within San Diego County against this scourge. Chris started to then say, in order to do this right, we need to collectively bring all of the well-intended nonprofits, government, service groups together in order to see what is working well, what is working effectively, what is sustainable. And in the same vein as the district attorney's office, with a keen eye toward prevention. So what we do and how we do it is in close coordination with UBS Financial Services and the San Diego Human Trafficking Prevention Collective, because their vision is to take the best practices that they are seeing in San Diego County and replicate that in other cities across the United States. And so our thought is what we're going to learn over the next several months and theoretically years will create ultimately a playbook that we can turn and take to other districts, that as UBS takes this prevention collective concept in other cities, we can approach the districts and say, if you want a district-wide initiative, here's the game plan. Here's how you affect it, and here are the people that you coordinate with: government, law enforcement, and these intended collectives. We think that is something that we can scale over the next few years. But in the short term, here's what we're building up. The first thing we said is we need to tell Rotarians what human sex trafficking is and is not. I told you about sort of the myths and realities. It certainly was for me until it became clear through an experience I had with my club's Camp Enterprise, where we had a 16-year-old human trafficking survivor who participated in that and announced bravely to this new friends that she was, and was embraced with a love that was so palatable in this setting, that I woke up to the fact that this problem was on my doorstep. It wasn't somebody else's problem. It didn't exist in another part of San Diego County. It was right here. We need to tell other Rotarians that. So we've got a subcommittee that is developing a 3-tiered workshops that we will start virtually. We're hoping that we can put something together here by next month. It is in development right now, thanks to some very dedicated folks on the steering committee that will then be able to launch. We're going to leverage this with what we call lived experience experts, people who have been trafficked, people who've actually exploited others, and people who are experts in both the prevention side, law enforcement side, education side. And the intention for that one is to showcase to Rotarians what it is and what it isn't, and make them smarter as to what the problem and the potential solutions are. As we do that, we are also, as we talked about, putting together a global grant. The global grant will do essentially 2 things. One is it will continue the funding that many of us have already started, my club included, with arming the teachers with the proper training in order to spot if one of their students is the target of recruitment, because it is happening in plain sight and without most of us being aware that it's happening. Teachers are on the front line of making that happen. My club put $45,000 in play with San Diego Unified, San Marcos Unified, and Sweetwater Union High School District this last year. Now it's been slowed up in being able to get that training implemented because of COVID, but it still is in the works. Now, the training itself, I should say, is free. At issue is funding the in-service training days that teachers need in order to take that, because otherwise you've got to fund a substitute teacher and let them and have them take time out of the classroom to do so. The issue is making sure they have the time on that one, because quite frankly, the public school districts have several unfunded mandates. And so this would fall into one of them unless you can actually fund an in-service day and pay for their time. And so that's what we're doing. The 45,000 we put in play estimated will train about 700 teachers. We think there's probably an additional $45,000 to $65,000 that will need to be in play, and the global grant will help support that across other public school districts. Our target, as I just mentioned, is public school districts. We certainly may entertain charter and private schools, but quite frankly, those are last on the list because they've got foundation arms that can help with that. So our focus is the public school districts throughout California to do so. So training and arming the teachers with the awareness on that is just as important for us. If there's any money left over in the global grant, we are also going to conduct a countywide media relations campaign, probably more geared toward the digital side than it is, let's say, billboards and television ads and radio ads, because the money will just go farther. And as we've seen over the last 6 months, if there were a handful of us who necessarily weren't digitally savvy or ones who communicated through this computer medium, well, we all are now. So we think it's actually one in which we'll draw greater eyeballs. More to follow on that. And then the third area is with the projects. We do believe, because we're service-oriented folks, we don't sit here and sit on high and write checks and feel good about that. We like to get our hands dirty. And we're going to do so by actually being supportive to human trafficking survivors and victims. The reason we're focused on that is because, quite frankly, there are nonprofits that we can partner with a little easier to do so. When you want to do prevention net techniques and things like that in the public school districts, as some of you know, because I know you've got partnerships with that, it's an exhausting process to get all of the background checks and all of the youth protection plan and all the other things to do just to get into the schools. And it's a real challenge. But we think that it would be helpful to be of mentorship and support through a wide range of what we would call qualified nonprofits that help human trafficking survivors and victims on that. Now, that is also delayed in some respects because of COVID. There's not a lot of in-person opportunities, and we are asking nonprofits, what are you able to do virtually? It could be as simple as mentoring them on resume skills, job training skills, interview skills, basic financial management skills, like how to balance a checkbook, how to do a budget. Because keep in mind, if the average age of these victims is 16, by the time they actually are able to, through courage and support, leave their trafficker and start on a path toward their own recovery through the mental and physical trauma that they've undertaken, but also have the mindset of moving forward. Some of them have never been trained or taught the basic art of managing a budget, let alone how to write a resume, let alone how to find opportunities for education and things like that. So we think that there's some opportunities on that, but more to follow. What we are doing, and this sort of gets back to how you'd spend the money, thanks to Mark's work, we have made overtures with an organization called Generate Hope. They run transition and rehabilitation houses in the South Bay and in Coronado for human trafficking survivors. And I know the executive director who is running that one, and it is a stellar group. They will take 6 months to a year to help those survivors through regimented training, evidence-based training on dealing with their mental trauma, but then also then developing the skills to empower them to live the life that they so want to live. They have a ton of deferred maintenance in the facilities, both in the Coronado as well as in the South Bay area. And I've got a list that I think is about $17,000 to $20,000 worth of projects that need to be funded, but also need volunteers to help out in kind of a Rotarians at Work day. I've got calls with the Coronado Rotary Club, and I've got calls with the Chula Vista Sunrise Rotary Club to see if they will help at least take the lead on that because those projects are in their backyard. But then we'll need to call for volunteers and funds to help do that from other clubs and create, if you will, a few Tiger teams that we will probably do in safe social distances, over outdoor activities of rehab and rehabilitation over the course of the coming weeks to make those, to take care of that deferred maintenance. I think they will be in general, my gut tells me that they will probably be in small numbers that'll occur over a period of several weeks. Rotarians at work, you can throw 50 bodies at a problem simultaneously and everybody work together. Probably not realistic just given COVID right now. But to the extent that we can start looking at, hey, 10 on this Saturday, another 10 on this Saturday, and parcel out the volunteers accordingly, and maybe even assign different clubs to do so, that's our intention. So we will look undoubtedly at raising funds for that one, because there isn't one in the district budget. The global grant didn't cover that area. And there is a genuine need that we think is going to make a big difference for that we can theoretically do now. They are, if you will, shovel-ready projects. So more to follow on that, but I expect in the coming couple of weeks, I will have more definitive answers on that, Judy, for that. So hopefully I've given you a very high-level overview as to what the district's focus is for anti-human trafficking, the kind of things that we're looking to get Rotarians involved in, and specifically this project. I'm going to shut up now to answer any questions some of you may have.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
What sort of outreach programs or organizations is Rotary collaborating with to find these survivors and these victims? Like, how do we know about Seeds of Hope, it's called Generate Hope. Where do we find the victims? The short answer is there's a plethora of nonprofits that for which we already know. Generate Hope is just one of them. There's another organization that's pretty popular in terms of its awareness and also its mission and its effectiveness, called Free to Thrive. Free to Thrive is a nonprofit, essentially legal service that offers pro bono legal help to human trafficking survivors. And the reason that's necessary is because most of the human trafficking survivors, not all of them, but most of them, will essentially escape their traffickers because they've been arrested. They've been arrested either for prostitution or trafficking drugs or some other means. And unfortunately, the way the criminal justice system views them now is they view them as a criminal first and a victim second. So that inhibits those survivors' abilities
to get education grants, job training services that are offered by the government because they're oftentimes convicted felons. Free to Thrive helps expunge their records so they can allow them to get the services that they need in order to move on with a productive life. So that's another example from that. Point Loma Nazarene University has a great program that they're piloting for survivors as well. So I will tell you, it's not a question of finding the opportunities to help the survivors. The opportunities are partnering with the right organizations in order that are sufficient and efficient to do so. We also, I failed to mention, there's another group that's sort of working on that best practices document, because what we want to do is be that not only blueprint for other districts to say, these are the type of organizations and the effectiveness that you want to look at when you're looking at partnerships. Because I will tell you, there isn't a lack of people wanting to tackle this problem. Some well-intended people and well-intended organizations are actually doing this in great numbers. The problem is that some of them are very ineffective at what they're doing. Some of them don't look at the problem for what it really is. I talked about the myths and the realities. And they're going about it wrong. And in some cases, in my opinion, are actually creating more harm than good. This reminds me, I'm a former Navy officer, and in my early days, now 28 years ago, we did counter-narcotics operations. And this reminds me, the scourge against human trafficking has the potential to go by the way of the war on drugs, which is well-intended organizations, not coordinated, and ineffective. And the last I checked, we still have a drug problem in the United States. I can see the pitfalls of anti-human trafficking initiatives falling by the wayside if not coordinated and best practices aren't shared. So that was a long answer, Mary, but I hope that provided you at least a thought on that one.
No, it's very helpful, because I think it's just like the military. There's so many military or, to support the military, and so many outreach programs. And I know there was a couple of organizations that really did their due diligence to try to pull it all together, because we all want to help, but, to have the information of, the inefficiencies, the efficiencies, which organizations, because as we started to research anti-human trafficking, there's so many organizations that do so many different things, and they're all good, but it's just very difficult to get, someone to spend the time and build a blueprint, but then also do the due diligence on each one of these organizations.
And we're trying to at least create a playbook by which we can guide districts to figure out these are the type of organizations for which you want to partner when you ask these type of questions. And so while we won't expressly say it, what we're saying is, and the other organizations that can't sort of meet this, you kind of want to take a second look before you get involved with that. Cinda, you raised your hand. Did you have a question?
Yes, I'm interested in the prevention aspect, and I understand that the DA's office has created a program that they are taking out, but I don't know if they're taking it out to the teachers or to the kids themselves. Do you know anything about that?
So it is in partnership with the San Diego Human Trafficking Prevention Collective and a nonprofit called Three Strands Global. Three Strands Global is based out of Sacramento. Their CEO, Ashley Bryan, happens to be a Rotarian and also on the Rotary Action Group Against Slavery organization, the action group for that one there. And they're the ones who created the training program for teachers that the district is pushing out. They've got essentially two-pronged approach. The district, through Three Strands Global and through its work with the Human Trafficking Collective, are designed to talk with students, the peer recognition and the training that's afforded from there. But they also have training for the teachers. And the reason that we got involved, my club got involved, was when I decided 2 years ago. So I was president-elect. I just started my president-elect, and I had this aspiration to create initiatives around anti-human trafficking, and got the conversations from that. In addition to sort of being aware that prevention was where we should focus, the teacher training was interesting to me because one of the things that came about through the district attorney's efforts and this prevention collective by UBS is they put a lot of money into this training program for students. And one thing they didn't think about was the need to fund the in-service days. They thought teachers were just going to be able to do this. And it really became eye-opening for a lot of them, including myself, about how many unfunded mandates there are for teachers, how much of their day has to spend doing things that, quite frankly, they're able to be compensated for the time. They have to do it on their own time, evenings, weekends, and things like that, in addition to, oh, by the way, teaching. So working on a funding vehicle to fund the in-service days was important. So this is in lockstep with that. And again, that's why I sort of emphasize the coordination elements. The idea of having those open lines of communications with the district attorney's office and the Human Trafficking Collective is vital, because otherwise all we do is trip over each other. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, I've always been very interested in the self-esteem, personal confidence issue with the kids themselves. Is there any program that goes to them directly with that?
It's this peer level human trafficking, the Three Strands Global talks about supporting each other and building up people's confidence, right? And this goes back to the archetype. And again, I don't want to paint too broad of a picture as to not recognize that there are nuances to everything, including of which that a significant percentage of victims are trafficked by family members, just as an aside. But there is certainly a recognition that groomers will prey. Groomers are the people who sort of start recruiting at an early age. They prey on the insecurities and the lack of self-confidence of young people, predominantly, but not exclusively, young girls. And showering with praise and gifts and lavish opportunities, and they're flattered. Somebody typically older is the one that's doing that, and it preys upon that. So yes, absolutely, the training program looks for peer groups and teachers to cite that and help intervene with among other things, self-confidence. I'm going to get not off topic here, but let me interject a personal perspective on this one there. And I haven't really done anything with this yet, not even to point of steering committee, but there are some organizations here that support what I call creative youth development. Mm-hmm. In particular, there's one called the David's Heart Foundation. I know the executive director is a member of my club, and they target young people that have been in and out of the juvenile court system. Or it doesn't mean that they've necessarily been in the juvenile prisons, but they are at risk, or they have been part of that. Mm-hmm. And they, through the use of digital media arts, mixing sound, audio, create this incentive program by which they've assigned mentors to say, hey, if you stay in class, you do these right things, we're going to show you how to work. We're going to show you how to create music, create art, create digital in the manner with which you want it to be. So they're sort of through their eyes. And it's been incredibly successful in that one there. And I went to an event that they were holding, and much, Cinda, to your point, I was seeing it through the eyes of these kids who had been in and out of juvenile court system, all of a sudden feel a level of confidence. They've been taught to do something. They're able to express positively through an art forum their views there, and they get praised for that one. And the light bulb went off. I literally was jumping out of my seat going, at some point with human trafficking and digital and creative youth development, these things need to converge a little bit more. Right now they're focused in sort of the law enforcement side, like the kids who are in trouble with the law. Mm-hmm. But I thought to myself, my God, this is as important for the young people that are being groomed, who don't have the self-confidence or the security in themselves to be able to channel that. And then, it's sort of like, then you sort of smack yourself in the forehead going, all of us have had mentors in our lives, right? Youth growing up, there was that teacher, there was that adult figure, that positive adult figure who guided us all through various stages of our lives, right? Well, sometimes these kids don't have it, or at least not to the level that they need in order to not fall victim to somebody who is giving them false praises and things like that. And so at some point, those will have to converge. We're at the building blocks of this one, right? We're creating a new district-wide forum. And what I'll tell you, what I've seen before, is there really hasn't been a blueprint for this as yet. We've got some things that we've sort of relied upon, different clubs have done, and then you have the Rotary Action Group for Slavery, which takes a global view, and until recently, a much more third world view, which is a lot more labor trafficking than it is necessarily sex trafficking. So we're creating something that we think we can show as an example and scale. We ain't there yet, right? We're 4 months into this thing and building this thing as we go. So this will not be a one and done year. We'll continue to move this forward. So part of that, hopefully that gave you a little bit more of where we think, at least vision-wise, this is going.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cinda.
And actually an update on that, just, most people think it's young girls, but actually on one of the human trafficking collective meetings I went to, actually there's 40% are actually males. The problem is that the males actually don't report the issues and stuff, so it's hard, the males themselves. So that's just an update there as well.
Well, Mark, isn't it, well, I guess Dave, all of you, isn't it more that they groom the males to be the groomers?
Here's the interesting fact, and welcome Mark, and this took me a while to sort of get my head around about a year ago, and it was with the managing partner and founder of Free to Thrive, that nonprofit pro bono legal service, who goes, when we started talking about training workshops, she says, you have to recognize and actually bring up the idea of showing empathy for the exploiter, the trafficker. And I looked at her, and I've known Jamie for quite some time through other means, and I looked at her and said, yeah, that's not going to happen. And she goes, no, you don't understand. People who are traffic victims often become exploiters themselves. And the trigger points between somebody being a buyer, a trafficker, and a traffic victim are often very similar. And once I understood that through lived experience experts, people who would talk about their experiences in being an exploiter or being a victim or being a buyer, I opened my eyes to say, yeah, we need to address this on multiple fronts.
When you say exploiter, is that like a recruiter?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The recruiters are often then the exploiters, right? So they're the people who exploit will groom their property. I don't know how else to describe it. And they will build them up. And the average life expectancy of a trafficker too is about 7 years in there too. So quite frankly, yeah, it's horrible and not easy to say, but somebody who's been in that world for a while will have to exploit and recruit new people. I don't know how else to tell you that. Mark, was there anything you wanted to add?
Just that, yeah, the males, are the vision, or the, what do you call it? The, what most people would think is that it would be only males as the exploiters and stuff, but the women as well. But even the victims themselves, young boys, there's a lot of unfortunately sick people out there that take that path. So it's a combination of both.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. What other questions do you have? Yeah, Judy.
So, great overview. And what I'm struggling with, and I think what people in our club have been, well, not struggling, but just trying to find something that we as a group can do besides just donate money. And I know it's really hard right now with COVID. So what would you advise that we take back to our club?
Well, I would love to be able to in a couple of weeks tell you, hey, I've got these dates available to do some of the deferred maintenance, and again, unskilled opportunities that generate hope and create a team that we can say, look, we're going to tackle this door repair, or we're going to tackle this paint job, we're going to tackle this driveway and things of that nature to do so. I'm not ready to discuss that yet, only because
Okay.
I need to give the Coronado Club and the South Bay clubs, like, here's what we want to do.
Yeah.
But once I do that, could the Coronado Club write a check for probably covering that? Maybe, but I doubt it. I mean, this is sort of, we're doing this after budgets are set and allocations are already done. And I think there's going to be a real need for that. So I'd love to be able to tell you.
Better spent if we can get free labor to spend the money somewhere else.
Well, it'll be the money that we're budgeting is just for bill of materials. It's just the materials and one or two skilled laborers who can say, we might be able to get some volunteers who, general contractors and things like that, licensed people to say, yeah, help, but I need I need 10 bodies to help me with this. Yeah, we can provide you the sweat equity and all that. So that's what we're looking at.
And then you talked about mentorships, and there was one, I think it was Operation Hope, I can't remember, but it was fairly involved mentoring. Is there another organization, like if somebody just wanted to help with resumes twice a month or something, what would we do for that?
Mark, refresh my memory, but the involved mentoring was Point Loma Nazarene, right? That was that.
It was both. They both had programs, but I think Generate Hope is kind of feeding off Point Loma Nazarene.
Yeah.
To be the initial experimental group. So it's the organizations working together and getting the programs off the ground and stuff. So.
But Judy, to your point, those were like multiple, series of events that you had to commit a certain amount of time.
Right.
The one area, and Mark was gracious enough to be part of this, Free to Thrive, and I mention them again only because we've had a relationship at San Diego Rotary Club 33. They were holding, actually as early as I want to say 6 weeks prior to COVID changing the world, a half-day financial budget management session. Yeah, and that was great. You basically played the role of these vendors, like for cars, boats, trips, and your job was to sell to the participants, these survivors, these thrivers as they call them, to try to get them to buy something, right? And then what you did is they showed in a very practical sense how they didn't have any money left over at the end of the month, right? And how they have to go back and sell back the stuff and make decisions. I know I told Jamie and the partners, I said, because it's a skeleton group over there and a lot of them legal, I said, and this was just, this was the district with Marta and other people, I said, you could hold these every week, and I think we as Rotarians throughout the district could fill your 20 to 25 volunteers to do that any Saturday. You just have to say how many you want to do. COVID's obviously put the kibosh on those in-person gatherings, but as soon as this world rights itself, we'll get back into that.
Okay.
Regarding the 2 safe houses that you mentioned, how many beds does each one of those homes have?
Oh, that's a really good question. I toured the one in Coronado.
Yeah, I don't think I had
back
that.
In October. I want to say it was like 20, maybe a little bit more than that. I will tell you that's a big issue, but I haven't even addressed it with Rotary because we've been focused on the prevention side. But if there's another area that needs to be addressed, not only in San Diego County but across the United States, is transitional housing, safe houses and beds, rehabilitation. I have heard, though I haven't gotten it, I would need to verify this, but it's something around 18 months for somebody who is a survivor to basically go through the necessary mental health services, behavioral health services, job training skills in order to live a productive life, just because of the trauma that they have. And in some cases, as I mentioned, the lack of fundamental training on basic life skills that you wouldn't expect, somebody whose average age is 16 to have. And certainly one that's been groomed since the 5th grade. And there are extremely few, minuscule, almost immeasurable amount of transitional housing beds, safe havens for that. Because you can't expect the victim, the survivor now, I should say, to go back to their environment, right? It's just, that's not healthy, and it's not really feasible in some cases. In some cases, the individuals, depending on their connections, need to leave the area altogether because there is still concern for their safety and well-being. Also, it's what they know, right? It's I hate to say this, but I talked about how many of them will escape their lifestyle because they've been arrested and been thrown in jail. What I didn't tell you is that a significant percentage, if not a majority of those victims, when they are arrested and they are arraigned and then released on their own recognizance, will be picked up by their trafficker. Their trafficker will be the one to pick it up there. It's the only safety net they know. It's a false premise, but nonetheless one that they do, right? So yeah, safety beds, transitional housing there's a enormous need, and it goes into a whole lot of other things that, quite frankly, I wasn't ready to bring up to Rotary to involved with. It also was, I'm very sensitive at this early stage to do what I call mission creep, which is to sort of expand the scope beyond prevention and some of the volunteer. But because you're talking land acquisition, housing acquisition, permitting acquisition, the availability of qualified mental health at a cost that people can afford to, and donations for that, and it's just a little bit much. But that is certainly an element of this scourge that needs to be addressed.
And then how about opportunities for, so I understand the outreach program we are ready to get involved with, you know, maintenance on the safe houses or whatever that might be, and then the education prevention and projects. But how about in-kind gifts? You know, is there a list of needs that these safe houses have? Or just
great question. I don't have a good answer for that. But one in which we can, when we follow up with Annie Rodriguez, who's the executive director of Generate Hope, as an example, we can certainly ask. Okay. Great question.
It would be helpful to get a list, you know, and because that's something that we can do very quickly. Is you know, we need toilet paper, we need blankets, we need sheets, we need clothes, and that's something that we definitely can do very quickly.
Good point.
Yeah, earlier in the year, I sent out the specific needs that came from a different organization that did all that stuff, and a lot of that stuff was pointed out, and I could update that information as well, send it out again.
Well, that would be great.
But we also had a Marjorie Saylor just recently come in, and she's one of the Survivor Network people that supplies housing and stuff to survivors and stuff like that. So it's just,
Well, I think it's just getting our club focused on one or two mandates, two things that we want to focus on, just so we can have it, it's much more tangible for us to be able to feel it, touch it, see it. And so, yeah, I mean, one or two or three, we can have a group focused on the education, the prevention. We can have a group focused on the tangible items and in-kind gifts, and we can have a group focused on the outreach projects. Because we have different committees within our club, and we can, identify someone that can spearhead each one of those projects. Because it's a large undertaking. I mean, there's a lot.
Look, this is very similar to the fact that it's, as I mentioned, you have the war on drugs, because you have the prevention, you have the victims on both the buyer side, the user side, the traffic side, and then you have the rehabilitation side, right? It has that same level of scourge. And in San Diego County, not the exclusive, but a significant percentage of those who are victimized and trafficked and purchased is through the gang system, the same organization that traffics the narcotics, which is why it's a close second. It's the same transportation vehicles, for lack of a better term.
And Mark's done a great job, and so have Judy, giving us the information. It's just there's so much of it. So we were just wanting to kind of get a little bit more focus, because they've both been, communicating to us, getting us all the information. A few of us went through some brief training with, I think it was Point Loma Nazarene. There was a group there that came out. So we
Three Strands Global, I think, right?
That is Three Strands Global.
Yes. So we're ready to go. It's just a matter of where are we going with this?
I am grateful for so one of the things that I think we've all seen, and really not too surprising, is there is no shortage of people wanting to get involved. Right. And I have done a fantastic job of ticking off a lot of Rotarians in the area when they go, we want to get ready. And I go, glad, thank you. Hold that thought. Yeah. Just hang right there.
But it's good that you're doing that. I mean, it is very good that you're doing that. So we're not just all scrambling around, not making an impact that we really all want to make on this, at least take a little bite out of it.
I'm a big fan of sports, but I still don't get rugby. this scrum where everybody seems to go around there and the ball like goes over there. I see the kinetic energy of Rotarians all wanting to get involved and deal with this, and then the ball's like way over there, and it's like, well, let's take all that energy and let's try to channel in different areas, and we'll build upon this. It won't be quick, it won't be easy, but at least it will be something that'll be coordinated and efficient and sufficient, and then we can build upon it. And I'm recognizing that in the process, I'm telling people who are, when you hear about the number of victims, you hear the age of the victims, you hear about all of the trauma that's being involved, we as Rotarians, people of action, want to get involved. And when do we want to do it? Yesterday. And I'm telling them to go against their grain and let's build upon this. So I'm grateful for the time, and I'm also grateful for the patience.
Dave, is there like a Rotarian structure? I mean, I can't imagine that you and Steve are, taking this project for the whole entire, 5340 area on by yourselves. Do you have like somebody under you where it almost seems like there needs to be like a pyramid in part of this blueprint of like whether you're at the head or Steve, are co-chairing it, and then under there you have the 3 different areas captaining?
Grateful for that question. I am got the bird's eye view of the effort of right now consists of 10 Rotarians that are chairing subcommittees. Mark helping out with the projects, the volunteer projects that we have been. We have a subcommittee on the training workshops that we're putting together for Rotarians. And we've got one on the schools outreach. We've got one on the best practices from there. What our vision is and what we intend to do is to then build upon this committee through networks with predominantly, though not exclusively, the peace chairs of the Rotary clubs, the respective Rotary clubs, to work with the presidents-elect, and if they have a peace chair, to do so. Some have an anti-human trafficking chair. There's a couple of them that do, and so we want to work with that, but we want to get that communication out to start building the projects. Where we've been holding onto that until we have projects to do and the global grants, so we have funding to do the schools outreach. COVID has most certainly slowed this down. Like if it would have been me, we would have had the workshops set up already. We would have had projects identified, and we would start calling out and saying, hey, here are to the peace chairs, here's the communication. Let's set up a registration. Let's get people trained. Let's get things moving, and let's build upon this network of communication through the clubs and the peace chairs. We quite frankly just don't have anything yet. We're close on the workshops, but even after the workshops, the global grants taken us a little longer to get the funding for the school training, and quite frankly, we've just been stalled on the projects, awaiting for opportunities where we can safely do things. That's just the reality of which we live in. So I don't want to say we've reset expectations, but I think we've certainly measured our goals to say if we develop the infrastructure by the springtime of next year, we'll feel pretty good about it to then build upon.
Your club really is ahead of the curve. David started a year ago, and I speak to clubs 3-4 times a week as a speaker, and the presidents know that human trafficking was my project, my interest. And I get asked about it every time I speak. It's not my official visit, but it becomes part of the discussion. And to David's point, when I bring it up, the first thing is awareness. And most people are hearing that this is a problem, an issue for the first time. And boy, does that get them going. And that becomes the dominant conversation the rest of the time I'm with the clubs. So there is this interest, and you guys have a committee ready to roll. And the committee has been very methodical about going about how we as clubs and as a district are going to take this on. And we have 3 or 4 people working on the global grant. We have 3 or 4 people working on the training program, and 3 or 4 people working on developing relationships with the school districts so that we can work with them. And so it is a concerted effort. It's taking time, and there's an excitement about what we're doing. And as David said, for me, this was not a 1-year project as my district governor year. I'm going to become a past district governor, and this is going to be an ongoing project for me, because by the time we, June 30th comes around, it really is going to be the launch, because everything is staged and it should come together, but we're going to continue this. And I've gotten commitments from the governors after me that they'll support this. So you guys are doing terrific. I mean, it's like amazing.
Yeah, you are ahead of the curve, right? And it's a great one it's a great place to be, but I recognize the frustration about saying, look, we're ready to go. Where are you going? I'm like, yeah, we got to get everybody else up to speed, and we got to find opportunities that weren't inhibited by COVID. It is what it is.
And
I've
then,
got a couple minutes. Go ahead, Jerry. Sorry, I just have a couple minutes left before I got to run, but go ahead.
real quick question, just that blueprint that you're working on, is that have a list of all the organizations and who's going to be like, who handles housing and who handles the different areas?
It's exactly right. So it's the idea of finding out for all the areas. Here are your go-to ones there. We see that resource in sort of pockets of websites. We don't see a central repository. I don't think we're in the truest sense looking to create a repository for San Diego County, because there's a question of maintenance on that. But if we can create one that we can go in through Rotary clubs and say, here are some nonprofits, if you're going to do some volunteering, that are doing great work in these areas, please feel free to help with that. That would be essential. It is, much like Mary mentioned, there isn't a central repository for that, much like there isn't one for dealing with drug issues or military support issues, right? We're tripping over ourselves in this county. Being a former vet, I'm grateful for it. Or me being a vet, former active duty military, grateful for all the support groups that do it there. But, it's the same thing. There's no central repository to tell you where to go and what to do.
I have this, which is, can you see it?
No, it's your background is.
Your virtual background is
so I have about 4 sheets of different, the Lynch Foundation, Bilateral Safety, Million Kids, Alabaster Jar. Oh, there's a lot that I guess Mark handed out at a meeting.
Yeah, I'm actually, another committee I'm on is the Clearinghouse, and we're in the process of narrowing some of that information down as well. So that's in works and hopefully to be finalized as well. So
maybe not recreate the wheel, but share.
Yeah.
Well,
I think
Mark,
really
what
good
you got
collaboration would be also with the private foundations. So I've had a few clients that actually, they create their own private foundation, and it was focused on anti-human trafficking or supporting safe houses or whatever it might be. And I know that Mark had asked us to put a list together, or committee, of any organizations that we are aware of or private foundations that we knew about that focused, and this was their mission statement. So there was a big list that we all put together of different organizations just in San Diego. There's a lot of them.
Right.
Take on little bites and little pieces of all of this. So, but I do have a couple of people that I know that their own private foundation is focused on.
Yeah. And again, the idea about redundancy, efficiency, sufficiency.
Yeah.
Right?
So David, were you going to ask Mark for this list? Do you need it, or?
I think Mark gave you that list, didn't he?
Oh, okay. He gave me the list, but you have it too?
So I have it, yes. So the subcommittee Mark's talking about is under the Human Trafficking Task Force.
Got it. Okay.
Mark has been grateful enough to do the projects, but also serve on that one. That is the document that is in development that we were sort of talking about, and Mark's been instrumental, along with a couple of other steering committee members, on that particular project. I focused you on sort of the actionable items. That is as much about a best practices document that we'll share with the District 5340 clubs, but also hopefully serves as a blueprint along with the other action plans that we can scale to other districts. Like, here are the type of organizations that we are encouraging, support, and why. And again, under the ideas of efficient and sufficient outcomes.
Okay. So it's 11 o'clock, and I know David has to go.
I do.
Anything else? We good?
I think we're good.
Thank you so much for your time. You've really shared a lot of information. I think
this is incredible.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I'm grateful for what you all do. I'm grateful that you've allowed Mark to be a part of this one amidst what is, I know, an amazingly hectic schedule, not only with Rotary and work, but that he decided to take on SDMAC. And I'm grateful for Steve's leadership and support of all this. So thank you for what you do. Please feel free to reach out and ask questions. If they're hard, I'll just turn them over to Mark, and so make him answer that.
So I think we're
if
going
you
to
have
leave the
anything else.
meeting with, we will wait. Our grant definitely is already approved, but we will wait for more direction.
I am hoping in a couple of weeks I can get back to you with some definitives on Generate Hope, but that's where I think it would go.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right,
Thank you
guys,
all.
be
Thank you
well.
very
Thank
much.
you.
Bye, everybody.
All right,
Thank you, guys.
bye.
Mhm.